Chapter 1, Snowbound Bargain. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls through the jagged mountain passes, driving the blizzard against a small, weather-beaten cabin. Inside, the fire flickered and hissed, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn walls. Eliza shivered, not entirely from cold, as the iron cuffs bit into her wrists. She glanced up at the man standing by the hearth. Colton, Bear McGraw, mountain man, legend, and now, inexplicably her captor. "Sit," Bear grunted, gesturing to a creaking wooden chair near the fire. His broad shoulders blocked most of the flames, leaving only flickers of amber to dance across his rugged, weathered face. His dark eyes, sharp as a hawk's, watched her with something more than mere suspicion, something that made her pulse quicken despite herself. "I won't sit," she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray her fear. "Not while I'm chained like some animal." Bear's jaw tightened. "You'll stay chained until you understand why you're here," he said, his voice low and dangerous, yet not unkind. He lifted a thick, callous hand to ruffle the wild tumble of her hair, almost tenderly. Eliza recoiled, heart hammering, her chest constricted by the mix of indignation and something else she couldn't name. The storm outside clawed at the roof, shaking loose a flurry of snow that drifted in through a crack. Eliza pulled her thin coat tighter, shivering. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howl of the wind. "Why force me to marry you?" Bear leaned against the mantel, eyes darkened with memory. "This land," he said, gesturing to the mountains that rose like silent sentinels beyond the frostbitten windows. "It's all I got left of my family. Without heirs, it'll die with me. I won't let it go." Eliza's chest tightened. He sounded so certain, so immovable, yet she saw the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. Her defiance wavered, but only for a heartbeat. "And you think I'll just obey?" she snapped, stamping her boot on the floor. The metal clinked against the stone hearth. "I'm not a prize to be won." A flicker of a grin tugged at the corner of Bear's mouth. "Ain't nobody said you were a prize," he muttered, voice gruff but amused. "But survive this winter with me, and maybe you'll see there's a life worth more than town gossip and empty promises." Outside, the coyotes cried in the distance, the snow thick and unyielding. Inside, the fire crackled, throwing warmth and shadow across two very different lives bound together in a frozen wilderness. Eliza's pulse raced, equal parts fear and fascination. The man who could crush her with a hand seemed impossibly human. She sank into the chair with a reluctant sigh, the cuffs biting at her wrists. Bear sat across from her, the tension in the cabin thick as the storm outside. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then the quiet hum of survival, the fire, the wind, the distant howl, filled the space between them. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Eliza wondered if perhaps this mountain man held more than just the cold, unforgiving land in his grasp. Perhaps, buried beneath the gruff exterior, he held the faintest glimmer of something else, something dangerously like desire. Chapter 2, Fireside Sparks. The blizzard outside had settled into a steady, relentless howl, hammering against the cabin walls with icy fingers. Inside, the fire had grown brighter, licking the rough-hewn beams and casting shadows that danced across the room. Eliza had finally removed her coat, her hands still red from the cold, and Bear had thrown a thick blanket over her shoulders, grumbling under his breath as if annoyed at his own generosity. "You'll catch your death if you keep sitting there shivering," he muttered, tossing another log onto the fire. Sparks leapt and crackled, filling the room with warmth and a faint, smoky scent. His dark eyes, flickering with firelight, didn't leave her face. Eliza felt heat rising to her cheeks, not entirely from the blanket. "I can take care of myself," she said, her voice steady, though her fingers clenched the fabric tightly. "I don't need your pity." Bear grunted, settling onto a chair opposite her, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. "It ain't pity. Just don't want you to die before you see what these mountains can teach you." His tone was rough, but beneath the gravel, there was something like a warning, or perhaps a challenge. Eliza raised an eyebrow, curiosity battling her stubbornness. "Teach me, huh? And what exactly can I learn from a mountain man hiding in the snow?" A faint grin tugged at Bear's lips. "Everything you'll need to survive out here. Riding, hunting, tracking, and maybe how not to freeze to death when you're alone in a blizzard." He leaned forward, the firelight catching the scar along his jaw. "If you're smart, you'll listen. And if you're brave," his gaze flicked down her eyes, then back to fire. "Maybe you'll learn something about me, too." Eliza's heart skipped, and she swallowed hard. Brave? She barely felt brave just being here, trapped in the cabin with this dangerous man. Yet a strange thrill ran through her at his words, the kind of thrill that came from standing at the edge of something wild and unknown. "Show me, then," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Teach me. If I survive, maybe I'll listen." Bear's grin widened, a flash of something almost tender breaking through his gruff exterior. "All right, then," he said, rising and moving to the corner where his riding gear lay. "First lesson, how to handle a horse that thinks it's smarter than you. You'll need to trust me, but I expect the same from you." Hours passed, filled with the rhythmic clop of boots, the shuffle of tack, and the occasional burst of laughter from Eliza when Bear's temper flared over his stubborn horse. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, a different kind of fire had taken hold. A dangerous, thrilling warmth. Later, as the wind howled against the cabin, Bear sat close to the fire, and Eliza noticed how his arm brushed hers. She didn't pull away. The air between them thickened with unspoken words, the tension stretching tight, like the bowstrings Bear taught her to draw earlier. In the flickering shadows and the wild, lonely mountains, two hearts that had begun as strangers felt a pull neither could name. For the first time, Eliza realized the mountain wasn't the only thing she needed to survive. Chapter 3. The Saloon Duel. The town of Redridge lay half buried in snow, its dusty streets slick with ice, wooden sidewalks creaking under the weight of boots. Eliza wrapped her coat tighter, the cold biting at her cheeks, as Bear led her through the silent town to the saloon. The faint smell of whiskey, smoke, and horses hit her as they pushed through the swinging doors, revealing a haze-filled room alive with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Heads turned immediately, whispers slicing through the air like knives. "The Shackled bride, she's here," someone muttered, and a ripple of curious stares followed their every step. Eliza's heart pounded. She could feel Bear tense beside her, his large hand brushing against hers. Not quite touching, but enough to send a jolt through her. "Stay close," he muttered, his voice low. "Just for her. Keep your eyes open." Eliza nodded, gripping the edge of her chair, but curiosity made her glance around the saloon. Men paused mid-drink to watch her, some leering, some wary. One in particular caught her attention, a tall, slick-haired suitor from town who had long whispered promises of wealth and safety. His eyes narrowed and a slow, arrogant smile spread across his face. "So, the mountain man finally brought his prize to town," he sneered, stepping forward, hand twitching near the pistol at his hip. The saloon went quiet. The piano stopped mid-tune, and all eyes seemed fixed on the tension building between the three of them. Bear's jaw tightened. "She ain't nobody's prize," he said, voice like gravel rolling down a mountainside. His hand hovered over the butt of his revolver, but his eyes never left Eliza. She felt a surge of pride. He wasn't just protecting her. He believed in her strength. The suitor laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Bet she's wishing she was back in town already." Eliza straightened, her pulse quickening. "I'm not wishing for anything," she said, her voice cutting through the hush. "And I don't need anyone's protection but my own." Gasps ran through Saloon. Bear's eyes widened in surprise and something warmer. Pride. Maybe. The suitor's smile faltered. He drew his gun with a flourish, aiming at Bear. Stand down. Bear barked, spinning, gun drawn, his movements fluid, deadly. The first shot rang out, cracking against the wooden floor. Patrons ducked, chairs scraped, and the piano player's fingers froze mid-chord. Eliza's heart raced, but she didn't cower. Instead, she moved instinctively, stepping to the side and grabbing a fallen chair, ready to defend herself if needed. Bear's eyes flicked to her for a fraction of a second, a mixture of warning and admiration, and she realized in the chaos he saw her not as a damsel, but as his equal. The showdown ended almost as quickly as it began. The suitor's gun misfired, and Bear's aim was true, sending a warning shot into the ceiling. The man stumbled back, cursing, and fled into the snow outside. The saloon erupted into whispered awe, some clapping, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Bear lowered his gun, exhaling slowly, and looked at Eliza. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now, a flicker of something intimate hidden in the gruffness. She nodded, cheeks flushed, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "I am now," she replied, letting a small, triumphant smile play at her lips. For the first time, the mountain and the town seemed to shrink around them, leaving only Bear, Eliza, and the spark of something dangerous and thrilling, stronger than the storm outside. Chapter 4. Frozen Hearts. The blizzard had returned with vengeance, blanketing the mountain in endless white. The cabin groaned under the weight of the snow, icicles dangling from the roof like frozen daggers. Inside, the fire fought to keep the cold at bay, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. Eliza lay bundled on the bed, a thin fever creeping through her, cheeks flushed pink beneath her tousled hair. Bear hovered near the hearth, a steaming cup of tea in his hand, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have caught that," he muttered, setting the cup on the small table beside her. His eyes, dark and intense, lingered on her flushed face. "If you're going to defy me, at least don't get sick doing it." Eliza coughed softly, clutching the blanket closer. I couldn't just sit by. The horse was stuck in the snow. I had to." Her voice trailed off, her pride warring with the weakness in her body. Bear's jaw tightened, a flicker of worry breaking through his stoic mask. He knelt beside her bed, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead with surprising gentleness. "You can't do everything alone," he said quietly. "Not out here. Not with this mountain breathing down our necks." Eliza's heart fluttered at the unexpected tenderness. She wanted to recoil, to remind herself that this was the man who had brought her here under duress. But his gaze held something raw, unguarded, something that made the walls around her chest tremble. "And what if I don't want your help?" she whispered, voice thick with fever and emotion. Bear's hand lingered near hers, rough fingers brushing hers by accident, or perhaps by intent. "Then I guess I'll just have to stick around until you realize you do," he said, voice gruff but edged with warmth. The fire crackled, throwing flickering light across his rugged face. Outside, the storm howled and the wind rattled the cabin, but inside, the space between them grew warmer, charged with unspoken desire. Eliza felt a stirring in her chest, an unfamiliar ache that made her pulse race faster than the wind outside. Hours passed in quiet moments of shared vulnerability. Bear fetched blankets, checked her temperature, and muttered directions like a mountain man half lost in gentleness. Eliza, in turn, studied him, the lines etched by years of survival, the scar that traced his jaw, the tension in his shoulders that eased only when she spoke. As the storm finally began to wane, a fragile hush settled over the cabin. Bear sat beside her bed, brushing the hair from her damp brow. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the room seemed to disappear, the wind, the snow, the isolation. leaving only the two of them, suspended in a quiet intimacy. Eliza's lips trembled as she spoke, barely above a whisper. I think I trust you. Bear's hand covered hers, firm and grounding. Good, he said simply, his voice low, almost reverent, because I think I'm starting to care for you more than I should. Outside, the last wails of the coyotes echoed across the mountains, but inside the cabin, a new warmth had taken hold. Of fire not of flames, but of hearts thawing, of trust born in the frozen wilderness. And in that moment, Eliza knew that surviving the mountain wouldn't be enough. To survive Bear, she would have to risk everything, even her heart. Chapter 5, Legacy of Love. The first thaw of spring had begun to creep across the mountains, melting snow into rivulets that shimmered in the pale morning light. The cabin, once shadowed and forbidding, now radiated warmth and life. Eliza moved carefully across the creaking floorboards, a basket of fresh herbs in her arms, while Bear sharpened his rifle outside, the scent of pine and wet earth mingling with the crisp mountain air. The peace, however, was fleeting. A sudden commotion erupted at the edge of the clearing. Horses' hooves pounding, voices shouting in a mix of anger and greed. Bandits, drawn by rumors of Bear's isolated land and hidden wealth, descended upon the homestead. Eliza's pulse spiked, adrenaline lacing every nerve. She felt Bear tense beside her, the familiar weight of his presence grounding her. Stay inside. Bear barked, eyes hard and calculating. But Eliza shook her head, determination flaring in her chest. I'm not hiding, she said firmly. We can't just wait for them to take everything. Bear's dark eyes softened, but only for a moment. Then we do it together, he muttered, his hand brushing hers in a silent promise. The next hour became a blur of dust, snow, and gunfire. Bear moved like a shadow, his strength and precision leaving the bandits disoriented and off balance. Eliza, surprising even herself, followed his lead, using clever distractions, knocking a man off balance with a swing of her coat, even flinging a bucket of water at a startled horse. Each narrow escape, each shared glance, deepened the bond between them, the danger fueling an intoxicating mix of fear and desire. When the last of the intruders fled, the cabin stood battered but unbroken. Bear lowered his rifle, chest heaving, eyes scanning the empty tree-line before settling on Eliza. She stood beside the door, mud on her boots, hair disheveled, cheeks flushed. Despite the chaos, she looked beautiful, feral, fearless, alive. You all right? Bear asked, his voice rough but soft, the edge of worry gone. Eliza smiled, a triumphant glint in her eyes. I've never been better. Bear took a step closer, the wind tousling his dark hair. You fought like a McGraw today, he said, pride warming his tone. I can't imagine doing this without you. Eliza reached for his hand, letting their fingers intertwine. Then don't. You won't have to, she said, voice steady, filled with emotion. The mountains seemed to hold their breath as Bear pulled her close, their foreheads touching. The fire from the cabin spilled across them, highlighting the raw intimacy between two hearts that had survived storms, snow, and danger together. Bear whispered, almost in awe, I don't just want you to survive with me. I want a life with you, here on this land as family. Eliza's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Then we'll make it ours, together. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, casting gold and crimson across the prairie, Bear and Eliza rode side by side to the thawing snow, the mountains echoing with the promise of new beginnings. The shackles that had once bound her were gone, replaced by trust, choice, and love, a legacy written not in land or law, but in hearts bold enough to risk everything for each other. Chapter 6, Sunset Promises. The mountains glowed gold and crimson as the sun sank behind the peaks, casting long shadows over the cabin and the thawed prairie beyond. Birds called to one another, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, a promise of warmer days to come. Inside the cabin, laughter and the soft patter of little feet echoed through the room. Eliza had given birth to their first child, a tiny bundle that slept peacefully in her arms. Bear leaned against the doorway, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the fiery sky. His dark eyes softened as he watched Eliza rock the baby gently, humming a tune he recognized from long ago. The gruff mountain man, feared across the territory for his temper and strength, now seemed almost at peace, his usual hardness replaced with quiet awe. "You did it," he said, voice rough but tender, stepping closer. "We did it." Eliza looked up, her cheeks flushed, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "We survived the mountain, the storms, and you," she teased lightly, though her eyes sparkled with love. Bear's lips twitched into the faintest smile in response, and she reached out, letting her hand rest on his chest. Outside, the ranch was alive with life. Horses grazed in the fields, and the sound of neighing carried over the rolling hills. Neighbors, once wary of the solitary mountain man and his shackled bride, stopped by, tipping hats and offering greetings. Bear and Eliza had become more than a story whispered in town. They were a testament to resilience, courage, and love born in the harshest of lands. "Ride with me?" Bear asked suddenly, holding out his hand. Eliza glanced down at the baby in her arms, then back at him, a playful glint in her eye. "I think we can manage that," she said, carefully balancing the child as they stepped outside. They mounted their horses, side by side, the golden sunset painting their silhouettes against the vast wilderness. The child cooed softly, swaddled in warmth, while Bear's arm stayed close to Eliza, protective yet gentle. For the first time, there was no fear, no chains, no looming blizzard, just the endless, untamed beauty of the mountains and the promise of the life they had chosen together. As the sun slipped below the horizon, Bear whispered, his voice low and reverent, "No storm, no danger, nothing could ever keep me from you." Eliza leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her hand. "And I'll never leave your side," she said softly. "Not now, not ever." The mountains held their silence, the sky deepening into twilight. In that moment, two hearts that had braved snow, storms, and danger found peace in each other. The cabin, the ranch, and the wild land beyond became more than just home. They became a legacy of love, courage, and the promise of forever. And as the first stars pierced the twilight, Bear, Eliza, and their child rode toward the horizon, the sun setting behind them like a vow written in gold. A life, a family, and a love that would endure every trial the Wild West could throw their way. The sun dipped low over the plains, painting the sky in fiery streaks of gold and crimson. Dust swirled across the prairie, carried by a warm wind scented with sagebrush and the faint tang of distant campfires. Horses nickered softly in the corral, their shadows stretching long across the cabin's porch. Somewhere, faint piano notes drifted from the town saloon, mingling with the distant howl of a coyote. Wild, untamed, and free, just like the land itself. Eliza stood at the edge of the wooden fence, the baby cradled in her arms, blanket flapping in the breeze. Bear emerged from the cabin, rifle slung across his broad back, eyes soft but steady. He stopped a few paces away, letting the sun gild his rugged features, the harsh lines of the mountain man softened by warmth and pride. "You ready?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper carried on the wind. Eliza turned, eyes shining. "I've been ready as long as I've had you," she said, stepping closer. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally, like they'd always belonged together. Bear's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then let's ride into tomorrow together," he murmured. He lifted his hat, tucking it under his arm, and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. The two of them mounted their horses, the baby safe between them, and rode toward the horizon, the mountains behind them fading into purple shadows. The wind carried their laughter, their hearts, and the promise of future forged in snowstorms, gunfights, and firelit nights. "I'll follow you anywhere," Bear said, his voice husky with emotion. "And I'll never let go," Eliza replied. As the sun vanished, the plain swallowed them in twilight, leaving only the silhouettes of two souls who found love and freedom in the untamed Wild West, ready to face whatever adventures awaited together.